Good morning. Welcome to everyone with us here at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco and those joining on live stream. Bienvenidos a todos. I'm Worship Associate Mari Magaloni Ramos. My pronouns are she, her. I'm joined at the chancel this morning by our guest minister, Reverend Daniel Lawlor. We're grateful to everyone making this service possible this morning. Our live stream team, Eric Shackelford, and pulling double duty today, Francisco Castellanos, who is also one of our sextons, and of course, our communications director, Jonathan Silk. We also thank the sextons, Thomas Brown and Jose Matias Pineda, and thank you also to Amy Kelly for providing us with these beautiful flowers, to our ushers, headed by Linda Messner, and today's musicians, flautist Jesse Nucho, thank you, song leader Nancy Munn, and pianist William Garcia Gans. What a remarkable community, and what a blessing to be together today. A quick COVID note, masks are no longer required, but there is an uptick in cases this summer, and you're encouraged to do whatever you need to feel safe and comfortable. We know that it continues to be challenging for folks who are at high risk to gather in person. To make it easier, to my left is a section against the wall marked reserved for those who want to be in a masked-only section. So I am so very happy to introduce our guest minister, Reverend Daniel Lawlor. Daniel, whose pronouns are he, him, is originally from Rhode Island. Prior to studying for ministry, Daniel served as a development director at a nonprofit for early childhood literacy programs in Oakland, Hayward, and Newark, California. Daniel is a proud graduate of Boston University School of Theology and serves as the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Hudson Valley in New York. Daniel served for 3 years as co-director at UU Ministry for Earth, dedicated to spiritual care and coalition building for climate justice in our movement. Daniel and his spouse Yumi are inspired by caring communities and honored to witness the joys and sorrows in our faith. In 2018, Daniel and Yumi actually met and married in San Francisco. They are currently here for the summer caring for their son, JJ, who was born early while Yumi was on a business trip in late April. The family is grateful JJ received excellent care and support through the NICU at CPMC, just across the street from our congregation.
What a gift to be with you in this space. I just want to say thank you to this congregation. Over the past few months, while my wife and I were caring for our son in the hospital, I would often just quietly sneak in and come to services on Sunday morning, and it was a gift to just be a participant in this space and be moved by the stained glass and the words and the meditation and the care and kindness that you all exhibit. And it was fun to kind of just be a congregant again. Our tradition is symbolized by the chalice all around the world today, in Manila and London, in New York and Alabama, and right here in San Francisco, we will light a chalice. It's a sign of hope. It comes to us from the struggles in World War II, where our ancestors in this faith worked for refugee relief and escape from fascism. It is a sign of hope and joy and a sign of resistance. And as we light that chalice this morning, I invite all of us in this space to join in the unison affirmation. Together we say, we light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the fire of commitment. We light this symbol of our faith as we gather together. Thank you.
Our first hymn of the morning, hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's new fall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Good morning. I'm Galen Workman, moderator of the Board of Trustees. I want to thank you for joining us today. And I would like to join in giving a especially warm greeting to our guest minister, Reverend Daniel Lawlor. Welcome. If this is your first time coming to the service in person, or if this is your first time watching on live stream, thanks for joining us. If you would like to receive a copy of The Flame, our weekly newsletter, which includes a link to the order of service and Sunday live stream, you can fill out one of our yellow connection cards. These forms are on the welcome table outside the sanctuary, perhaps in a pew in front of you, and available in a link in the order of service or video description of today's service. Now I'd like to ask Emma Wakeling, Membership and Young Adult Manager, to offer a special invitation.
Good morning, everyone. I just have a couple of announcements today. Firstly, we have our newcomer orientation taking place in the fireside room. And I'll be waiting outside the gallery to kind of lead everybody there. It's a great chance to meet some of our members, to meet other newer folks who are new to the church, and to ask any questions you have about our community or about UUism. So we hope you can join us. Secondly, I'd also like to invite UUSF members to our Sunday Reflections event that we're having next Sunday. It's a really nice opportunity to think about, to reflect on your time here at UUSF, whether it's been a few months, years, decades, to think, what's it been like me being here? What would I like to do in the future? And we'll have some of our new members there as well, so it'll be a great chance to get to know them a little bit better. We'll have lunch there as well and some great conversations. So if you're interested, then come find me later or take a look at the order of service or the leaflets that we have outside. Or perhaps you'd like to play some games this summer. We have lots of games sitting outside in the courtyard, a great way to kind of meet people and just chill out in the beautiful courtyard this summer. So yeah, lots of lovely things to get on with. I hope you can join us for some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. The order of service does list events and links to opportunities to connect. Please join in any and all that interest you. Also, as a member of the Board of Trustees, I would like to encourage all of you to come up and talk with me or any board member about our plans for the year. Trustees have a green stripe on our name tags and hopefully an inviting smile on our faces. Well, maybe not. Please give us your comments on what you'd like us to focus on to make the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco a stronger, even more welcoming community. Now, before we pause to greet one another, I want to give a special invitation to those of you on live stream to participate on greetings and chat. Maybe say hi and say what the high temperatures were in your neighborhood this week and what the thermometer is reading now. And now, on live stream and in person, let's take a moment to greet one another.
So much joy, so much warmth, so much friendship. It's beautiful. I'm going to ask you to please stand as you're willing and able to say the words of our covenant together and then sing our doxology. The words of the covenant are on page 3 of the order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, by every tongue. De todos bajo el gran sol, surja esperanza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza, cantando de cada tierra, cada voz. Amen.
I'll be reading a poem by Aida Limon called Dead Stars. Out here, there's a bowing, even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute, it's almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash, the rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. It's almost romantic as we adjust the waxy blue recycling bin until you say, man, we should really learn some new constellations. And it's true. We keep forgetting about Antlia and Centaurus and Draco and Lacerta and Hydra and Lyra and Lynx, but mostly we're forgetting we're dead stars too. My mouth is full of dust, and I wish to reclaim the rising, to lean in the spotlight of streetlight with you toward what's larger within us, toward how we were born. Look. We are not unspectacular things. We've come this far, survived this much. What would happen if we decided to survive more, to love harder? What if we stood up with our synapses in our flesh and said no to the rising tides? Stood for the many mute mouths of the sea, of the land. What would happen if we used our bodies to bargain for the safety of others? For Earth? If we declared a clean night? What if we stopped being terrified? If we launched our demands into the sky, made ourselves so big, people could point to us with the arrows they make in their minds, rolling their trash bins out. After all of this is over,
Now is the time in our service for a moment of pause, of prayer, of meditation. The words I offer this morning come from a very special human being named Howard Thurman. Reverend Dr. Thurman was a mystic and a progressive leader in the 20th century and was a mentor to many key figures in the civil rights movement, including Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Pauli Murray. He was born in the segregated South at the end of the 19th century. And as an adult, he grew fascinated by the lessons and implications of the independence movement in India for his own freedom struggle in the United States. In the Depression, Thurman served as the senior chaplain at Howard University, and in the 50s, he became the first black dean at a predominantly white institution, Boston University. Despite all his tremendous academic accomplishments, he would always say the core lesson he learned was from his grandmother Nancy, who would say that never forget, you are a child of God. You are a child connected to the divine. And Dr. Thurman has a connection to this congregation and this city because it was here in San Francisco during the Second World War, when there was really no reason to have hope, he purposely founded one of the earliest intentionally interfaith multiracial congregations on the Pacific Coast, called the Church for the Fellowship of All Peoples. The inaugural service for that congregation, which still exists in this city today, was in this sanctuary. And at the end of his life, his memorial service was here in this sanctuary. He loved the power of silence to invite contemplation and to, quote, whisper a thank you to life, to God, or as you may say, to the fates. He and his wife Sue mentored people until the very end. And so, honoring Dr. Thurman and the legacy of this congregation, I invite us into this, quote, meditation of the heart, how good it is to center down. How good it is to center down, to sit quietly and see oneself pass by. The streets of our minds seethe with endless traffic. Our spirits resound with clashing, with noisy silences. While something deep within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. With full intensity we seek, as the thicket passes, a fresh sense of order in our living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure our confusion and bring meaning in our chaos. We look at ourselves in this waiting moment, the kinds of people we are. The questions persist. What are we doing with our lives? What are the motives that order our days? What is the end of our doing? Where are we trying to go? Where do we put the emphasis? And where are our values focused? For what end do we make sacrifices? Where is my treasure, and what do I love most in life? What do I hate most in life, and to what am I true? Over and over, the questions meet us in this waiting moment. As we listen, floating up through all the jangling echoes of our turbulence, there is a sound of another kind, a deeper note that only the stillness of the heart makes clear. This note moves directly to the core of our being. Our questions are answered. Our spirits refreshed. And we move back into the traffic of our daily round with the peace of the eternal in our step. How good it is to center down. May we find strength for these days, courage and hope for tomorrow. May it be so.
So our next hymn will be Meditation on Breathing in your teal hymnal, number 1009. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Thank you.
The offering this morning will benefit the work of the Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth. Read more about it in the order of service. To make a donation on Vanco, using the donate button on our website or by scanning the QR code below, please select the line for either Sunday plate offering or special Sunday offering. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Our spirits resound with clashing, noisy silences, while something deep within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. We are alive at such an amazing time. Such an amazing time. The stakes, even just day to day, if you listen to the news, seem like we might be at the beginning of an apocalypse. Or we're at the beginning of a century of transformation and hope. Or we're living in a time that's confused and might be somewhere between perfection and terror. Just like many generations before us. In the ancient book of Ecclesiastes, which is a collection of Jewish wisdom literature, there is a poignant meditation in the 4th and 5th chapters, which I offer a little adapted. And it is written, "More decent is a poor and wise child than an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. For out of prison an old and foolish king comes to reign, but the child that is born in the kingdom becomes poor. For a dream comes to reality through a multitude of action, and a fool's voice is known by a multitude of words." Are we known by a multitude of action or a multitude of words? In this century, are we to be known by how we act or what we say? Are we loyal to a poor, wise child or to an old, foolish king? Our tradition teaches that spirituality and community are related, that choices are sacred, that authentic connection blossoms where pluralism is honored. And in this glorious Gilded Age sanctuary, we have ancient reminders on the wall. The kingdom of God is within you. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with the divine? Those words call us into dialogue with ancient traditions. And as the theologian Dr. Sharon Welch reminds us, worship of nature, love, and interdependence, that does not ensure success. But it does offer the possibility of a life of belonging and resistance. As poignantly expressed in the prayer of sorrow in our gray hymn books, we have become estranged from the movements of the earth. We have turned our back on cycles of life. We have sought only our own security. We have distorted our knowledge. We have abused our power. The creatures are disappearing, and the humans are despairing. Perhaps in ways unintentional as a culture, we do find ourselves honoring foolish kings in industry, politics, and religion more than we do poor, wise youth. But today, as we gather in our congregation, joining hundreds throughout the whole city, joining 19 Unitarian Universalist congregations between Napa and Hayward, discerning this common question: what is love asking of us? What is love asking us on Market Street? What is love asking of us when we're on the Muni bus? What is love asking of us in our roles, in our professions, in our families? What is love asking us to do at this time? What does it mean to espouse faith in love and in a wider circle of concern during this time, a time for many of our peers of extreme heat, flash floods, and fossil fuel pollution? What does it mean to espouse faith in love when the structures of oppression are objectively racialized, class-inflected, and gender-dominating? And this is the great paradox. Our Unitarian and Universalist religious movements our traditions of freedom and organized love. They were born and grew during times of war. Whether we go and look at the Eastern Europeans, the early Unitarians trying to make a space for civil liberty, where we look at this congregation in the 19th century, where people were fighting for abolition and a vision of this country totally different from the 100 years prior. Or we think about the Universalists after World War II in Manila who were testifying for human rights and labor justice. The paradox of our faith is that we proclaim love and the necessity of care in times of upheaval and harm. And the unique challenge of climate justice, of responding to fossil fuel destruction, is real. But every generation has a distinct set of harms and foolish kings that we are called to either ignore, avoid, or resist, topple, and build something better. Ironically, the very bleak historical moments also bring forth opportunities to do tremendous good. Tremendous good. And our faith today asks us to proclaim love in a city that has struggled with earthquakes and may yet again, violence, police brutality, extreme inequality, addiction, and overdose deaths. What does it mean to proclaim love here? And I suggest part of the proclamation of love in this tradition, wherever you are in the world, is accompaniment in hard times, not avoiding. The great temptation in Unitarian Universalism is to go into an academic, emotionally removed space. Our ancestors fought for the freedom to interpret scriptures. But people are not books. People are people. We can't just put a person on a shelf and forget them. Sometimes we go through hard times, and the call of our faith, the call of freedom embodied in love, actualized, is to accompany during hard moments. We say that our interdependence is unbreakable. We can't ignore it, but it's a real fact. It's a real fact. I don't know about you, but I'm happy and humbled to be part of a network of religious communities going back centuries, reminding us that we are all tied together, that the sacred surrounds us, and that we have obligations to one another. And I'm also invited and challenged by interfaith leaders like Valerie Carr, who says, when I spend time listening to people who are speaking from their deepest wisdom, I can feel understanding, inspiration, and energy nourish the root of my own wisdom. Unitarian Universalism does not have a monopoly on love, but we have an important role to play in the coalition of faith seeking to make love and kindness real. And we have to listen to what love is asking us as individuals and as a community to do, because you and I have the same world that we're in. We hear the same stories, see the same news, encounter the same heartbreak on the streets. This is a heartache time. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change wrote, over the last century, human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in at least the last 2,000 years. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said the evidence is irrefutable. Greenhouse gas emissions are choking our planet and placing billions of people in danger. Global heating is affecting every region on Earth, with many of the changes becoming irreversible. We must act decisively to avert a climate catastrophe. Christiana Figueres, one of the lead negotiators for the 2015 Paris Climate Accord, said in a 2021 lecture, "The question that follows immediately, and that I am often asked, is, are we doomed?" And she replied, no, we are not doomed. The latest science tells us that to keep 1.5 Celsius not just alive, but front and center, we must have global emissions by 2030. A much shorter time frame than we expected in 2015, and we must actively protect and regenerate nature. So while long-term net zero targets are key to signaling a direction, our urgent need is emission reduction over the next 8 years together with the fierce protection of nature. From the Pope and the Dalai Lama, from the president of the Sisters of Mercy to the president of the Union for Reform Judaism, to our own Unitarian Universalist president, Sophia Bettencourt, religious leaders cry out for communities and culture to respond, to live more sustainably without exploitation, and to move from our dependence on fossil fuels to cleaner, safer energy. If anything, the mantra is we can change, we can change, we can change. And Reverend Dr. Thurman, whose words we heard earlier, was famous for saying, we can never return to innocence, but we can move forward with integrity. According to a 2022 study from Pew, 7 in 10 Americans said their local community experienced extreme weather. Imagine how many would say yes this year. And what is extreme weather? Droughts, floods, intense storms, water shortages, wildfire, rising sea level. Across regions and to an extent, even political affiliation, many individuals saw this reality contribute a great deal, or at least somewhat, to the weather patterns that they encounter. We cannot prevent the rains or cool the heat as individuals, but we can collectively cultivate a consciousness of accountability to pressure our institutions to do better. And I have been amazed at the dogged determination of young adults across this country to push and challenge our institutions to think about what we owe the future and the present. One of the scary things about being in religious institutions in the 21st century is that in so many respects, we, along with most major institutions in the US, have so little trust and so little respect. In fact, most Americans have far greater trust in small businesses than the Congress, newspaper, organized religion, big business, banks. Almost every major institution in our culture is viewed with suspicion. But Joanne Kawes has said, despair is not a religious solution. And oftentimes the distrust that people have of our institutions comes from an aching longing to see a commitment, an embodied change, or at the very least accompaniment in the hard times. And I often think about how can we as a religious community, whether here in San Francisco or in New Orleans or in Boston, show up to let people know we're not hiding our eyes to what's happening around us. About a century ago, Reverend William Lawrence Sullivan, who was a former Catholic priest who converted to Unitarianism in the Roaring '20s, he wondered, are we drifting into a situation in which the Unitarian Church is 70,000 members who will each just give you their 70,000 conjectures? Reverend Sullivan of blessed memory was more concerned than I am about making sure Unitarians or Universalists use the same vocabulary to talk about our faith. But his concern about the danger of diffusion, the temptation to avoid a definite answer, echoes to me a concern about the need to respond and collaborate in the face of the climate crisis. I have heard stories from ministers who have had to turn their congregations into shelters because of wildfires here in California. I have heard stories from ministers in New Orleans who saw their buildings flooded and neighborhoods destroyed. I have spoken with people whose congregation in the Hudson Valley in New York was flooded twice in 10 years and had to abandon it. and they are now meeting in a rented room in a Presbyterian church. The decades ahead suggest more upheaval to come, not just for Unitarians, Universalists. Numerous houses of worship cannot sustain the insurance costs that are tied with these disruptions. And in the wider community of faith here in California, life memorials and funeral services have been held by faith leaders for grieving friends and families, honoring loved ones who have died from heat exposure and flash floods. Just this past week in San Jose, an unhoused man succumbed to the heat. And in this heartbreak time, I suggest we have the capacity to work together. Religious institutions in this city and surrounding communities have served for decades as hubs of care for food, for shelter, for inspiration, for mutual aid. Now is the time to recall those stories and engage and learn with one another. I think back to the amazing testament of this congregation, from the early work for abolition during California's founding to the early support for the freedom struggle here during World War II. This congregation has been a leader in responding to moral crisis with creative responses. The world we are entering is one where we will all become familiar with crisis, but also may it be one where we become familiar with responding in love. Billions of dollars are spent by powerful entities to get us to give up, to hide in our apartments, to pay money to social media companies, and to hope everything will work out, because it's kind of scary. And that understandable temptation will bring us a 2030 I don't think any of us enjoy. And I know you're tired. I'm so tired. I feel like history has been on a loop for the last 20 years. But history is always on a loop. History is always on a loop. And we have the gift to decide how we will spend our time, talent, treasure, and this is important, the opportunity to be still, week to week. Howard Thurman would talk about the necessity to make time to listen to the still voice inside and the voices of those closest to the heartache. He was never patronizing. He was always curious. And I am humbled by the fact, the reality, that children born today will live into the 22nd century. And they will know a world far different in terms of weather than you or I or our grandparents did. But based on the collective decisions we make over the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, we will give these children a world that might be pretty good, or at least decent. It's possible. It's possible. The late Reverend William Jones, who is a leader in our Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist tradition and a founder of Black religious humanism, would implore often, waiting for sacred angels or waiting for a default liberal progress was avoidance of our individual responsibility to act. And avoidance hurt the weak, the vulnerable, and the oppressed. If you say the angels are going to take care of it or time, you're missing something. You're missing something. As religious institutions in the past, we have adapted to the heartaches of decades by providing food, shelter, hospice, warmth, security, comfort in the face of structural change. And I know, I have faith in my bones that we can be better and that we can listen to what love is asking us to do. A friend suggested to me that religion does three things. It provides mutual aid, it offers us anchoring rituals, and it's dream casting. It helps remind us that what is doesn't have to be. There have been people before us who have told stories and faced harrowing moments. and built something better. Sometimes they build something worse. But then a different generation inherits that and chooses what to do. All across this state could be climate-resilient housing, green space, clean energy, and community gardens. Every house of worship could be a cooling center in the heat. We don't have all the answers, but we can be part of the solution. We can be part of a community of coalition. Reverend Dr. Thurman would often say, in the quietness of this place, surrounded by the all-pervading presence of the holy, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in good times or in tempest, I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my highest resolve. And in that spirit, may we be attentive to the poor, wise youth. May we reject the entreaties of the old, foolish kings. And may we find strength for these days and courage and hope for tomorrow, as Dr. Thurman says. May it be so.
All right, our next hymn is hymn number 343 in your gray hymnal, A Fire Mist and a Planet.
And a planet, a crystal and a cell, a starfish and a saurian, and caves where ancients dwelt. The sense of law and beauty, a face turned from the sod. Some call it evolution, and others call it God. Haze on the far horizon, the infinite tender sky, the ripe rich tints of cornfields and wild geese sailing high, and over high and lowland the charm of goldenrod. Some people call it autumn, and others call it God. Like tides on crescent sea beach, when moon so new and thin, into our hearts high yearnings come welling, surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some people call it longing, and others call it God. A century lone and frozen, a mother starved for her brood, and Socrates dread hemlock, and Jesus on the rood, and millions who, though nameless, the straight hard pathway trod. Some call it consecration, and others call it God.
Thank you.
For our benediction, it is a tradition of this congregation. You are invited to hold hands with your neighbor. May we remember, even in hard times, we can accompany one another. May we remember that love is always a choice, and may joy accompany that love, even in sadness. Let's go and bring love to one another. May it be so.